Greetings, this is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. My goal today is to take a look at some of the form factors beyond price of fuel that make the semi-truck compelling. In particular, the usability of instant torque. Bonjour, wie geht's? Du stehst noch immer auf zwei Beinen, Strasvice, Ni hao ma. This is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. One of the things that Elon Musk pointed out when he brought forward the discussion of trucks was the fact that there is an ability to run a truck like a race car. The biggest component of this that I thought was kind of fascinating is an area of trucking that's called heel and toe while double clutching. What this means is that there's a process when you drive a large truck in which that truck requires the driver to do a process of manually spinning the gears so they synchronize as that truck moves up in its use of gears. The net result is that when you have a large semi at the 80,000 pound category and you're on the freeway, this works great because there's very little gear switching. But when you're near your destination, let's say in a neighborhood, you run into a challenge because there's a constant need to keep switching gears. So many of these huge trucks tend to avoid sort of center of city deliveries, etc. Will go to distribution centers, and then those distribution centers will pick up the deliveries in smaller trucks. So when you switch to electric, I was really fascinated by one of the major form factors was the fact that you don't have these heel and toe while double clutching issues. You have instant torque. So it's much easier to handle your load in terms of driving that vehicle in an inner city location, let's say, where there are a lot of lights. This was somewhat highlighted to me in Washington, D.C. this week because there's a driver of a dump truck who blew a stop sign or ran through a stop sign and ended up injuring a pedestrian severely. And I can kind of see why some of these guys tend to try to, if not roll full speed through, roll slowly through stop signs versus stopping, because if you have a very heavy vehicle and you have a number of stop signs and stop lights, it adds a lot of time to your trip as you're having to work your way through all of these gears. The other note I wanted to make about form factors on trucks that popped up is the fact that you have far fewer moving parts in that truck that enable you to sort of reduce the amount of wear and tear, for example, the transmission parts, etc. So you probably have 10% of the number of parts in an electric vehicle, including the truck, that you would in a regular diesel engine. So there's less to repair, less to break, etc., etc. One of the form factor that comes to mind is the whole issue of regenerative braking and the fact that instead of just using your brake pads to stop and get the truck going again, you can use regenerative braking as a way to both slow the vehicle down as well as recharge the engine to some extent. So I think this, is another form factor that's helpful to note. I was intrigued because, Elon Musk in his discussion ran through sort of three elements of the truck that he had driven. Number one was it drives like a race car, which is the torque issues that we talked about. He also pointed out that it could, tow a diesel or outpull a diesel in the opposite direction uphill. And that's totally on point because it takes a while for a diesel truck to build up its engine. Another element that I wanted to look at with the whole truck announcement, especially with its coming confirmations, is the fact that Elon sort of engaged in sort of a different process when it came to trucks. And I think that, it definitely builds up your competition coming after you plan. So as you'll notice with the Model 3, there's a couple of years prior to delivery that announcement was made and delivered. As soon as the truck was announced, the value of several truck engine manufacturers and trucking companies, truck building companies, dropped by 5 or 10% on the announcement because, clearly electric offers a lot of benefits that diesels cannot. So I was kind of intrigued by his sort of switch-in process, and it more unlike what we've seen in past years with automobiles as well as trucks, where you have 1 or 2 year ahead announcements. A 3 or 4 month announcement, really shows that he's being cautious about what he's saying to not sort of tip all the competition to what he's up to and potentially destroy his competitive advantage of time in order to get products out there on market before the competitors can respond. I was sort of planning on not covering any of the form factors that I just did because, yes, they're impactful in terms of the driver and the vehicle, but there were sort of 2 variables that came to mind that prompted it. Number one was the fact that, things like your ability to move fairly quickly with instant torque and a large load behind you in dense city settings is a big deal, because there are situations where those trucks can get stuck in traffic for long periods of time as they try to build up enough steam to move that load. The other factor that sort of popped to mind is that, unlike other solutions, right now a big part of, let's say, the European solution that makes Elon Musk and the Tesla compelling is some of the awesome tax breaks that have been offered. So if we look at Hong Kong, for example, they recently got rid of their tax credit relative or no taxes relative to the purchase of new electric vehicles, and it instantly put the number of Teslas into the 0 zone. In Europe, as we've discussed previously, there's $9 gas that people have to contend with. So when you can use electricity instead of gas and get the equivalent of $1 a gallon, you now have a lot of people that have elected to move in that direction. So one of the things about trucking is that the trucking solution, when you consider reductions in cost of repair work, as well as you combine a greater than 50% reduction in the cost of fuel, those are compelling whether or not there are government subsidies to play with. Because, for example, in the United States, the taxes are lower than in Europe, so you have a $2 price of oil and a $2 price of gas, where your equivalent may be in that $1 to $1.25 a gallon range on electric. In the case of Europe, with a $9 gallon because of taxes, the users there are saving a great deal of money. And after we see a lot of EVs from all manufacturers, including Tesla, the governments are really going to have to rethink their plan on how to acquire the taxes to pay for the things that the current taxes pay for, which will no longer be available when everyone's going EV. So what that means then is that it's likely that many of the buyers of EVs who are gung-ho because of the price of their fuel, once those subsidies are moved over onto electric vehicles in some way, it's going to affect the degree of sales that one might see in those spaces. There is something called early adopters, and in the United States we have a lot of folks who want to see this product and want the environmental impact, and those early adopters definitely represent 5% of the market, perhaps 10, but it's not 50% of the market. So it'll be interesting to see as we clear out the initial folks that really want to see change in this regard, how well sales go, particularly if the price of the vehicle remains, with the basement being in the $35,000 range. So in conclusion, I just wanted to share that there are other form factors that make the Tesla trucking solution compelling. And I think that those form factors, be it fuel, be it the torqueability of the vehicles, be it, as we all know, the pollution change, all add up to excellent reasons for there to be a truck conversion. And I think this benefits Tesla with its battery solutions, because even if there's a dry up or slowdown of any of the car activities, there's a huge amount of truck demand that's out there. Look forward to covering more of this. This is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. Please like and subscribe. Tschüss, macht's gut. Au revoir, tout à l'heure. Lehitraot, Choda Hafez. And look forward to our next conversation.